So, first and foremost, thank you for coming today to help us celebrate the signing of an act to further linkage commercial development to build housing, create jobs, and preserve inclusionary development. And while this legislation is a bit hard to understand, and it does not roll off the tongue, it is a very, very critical component of both Boston's housing and workforce plans. We need to be able to secure what we've got and, when appropriate, raise the funding requirements from private developers so that we can build additional affordable housing and educate and train our workforce, allowing them to take advantage of this strong economy. I personally want to thank the elected officials here that I'm sure the mayor will acknowledge, housing advocates, job advocates, and the development community that has come together out today, and there are developers here, to support this important bill. It will take us all working together to get this home rule passed at the state. It's not an easy feat, so I'm very much encouraged by the number of people here and the enthusiasm to make this happen. I also want to recognize the various city agencies that have worked really hard on this bill. The Office of Workforce Development, Intergovernmental Affairs, the Office of Economic Development, and Department of Neighborhood Development. I almost forgot them. That would have been problematic. And most importantly, the staff at the BPDA, Sunal Gandhi, Tim Davis, under the leadership of Director Golden. Thank you so much, BPDA. The BPDA has taken the lead on drafting the bill, making sure that all of you have been listened to, the edits and suggestions have been incorporated, and so I think, we have a very, very good piece of legislation. Our first speaker, Mayor Walsh, is committed to making sure that Boston remains home to long-term residents and new residents seeking a better life. He knows firsthand that in order for us to continue to build more affordable housing, we need to increase resources. No surprise there. And he has done just that so far. I just want to tick a few things off. He's helped secure the passage of CPA, which we did not have in the city for a very long period of time, and more recently worked with many of you to secure a larger match at the State House. He's increased the contributions that we're getting from both linkage developments and inclusionary residential developments. He's increased the city's budget for affordable housing by 45%. And he's made funding available to preserve Boston Housing Authority's public housing. His commitment, I know firsthand, it's real and it's very heartfelt. Let us welcome Mayor Walsh.
Thank you, Sheila, and I appreciate the acknowledgement there, but the acknowledgement of all of that list of accomplishments goes to a lot of people that I'm looking at, my colleagues in the council, the advocates, the residents of our city, Sheila and her shop. All of this, it truly is a group of us working together, and that's why we're here today. It's another step forward here, and I'm going to thank a bunch of people a bunch of times because it's important to do that. But a couple of people I want to just shout out right from the beginning. I want to thank Councilor Lydia Edwards for her leadership on housing. Lydia and myself were talking the other day, and we sat down for about an hour, and I think about 45 minutes of the conversation was about housing and about the need to do more. Even though I'm going to give you some stats in a minute that show us a national leader, but we need to do more. And I want to thank you, Councilor, for your advocacy and your great work on this before you're a councilor and after as a councilor. I want to thank Councilor Flaherty for guiding us through, guiding this to the council, and as the chair of the committee and the work you've done. I want to thank all the other members of the council here, Councilor Janey, Councilor Nisasabi-George, Councilor Zakem, Councilor O'Malley, Councilor Baker, Councilor Flynn, and all the other members of the Boston City Council for your great work. The housing advocates that are here today. I've known many of you for 25 years when I became a state representative, and during the budget season around April, we would be talking about fighting for more money and fighting for more opportunity and 25 years later, we're still doing the same thing, and we're all fighting together. So thank you for keeping the good fight up for so many people. We're lucky to have many of you and the dedicated partners in this work. This Home Rule Petition addresses a very important pressing need in Boston, how we make sure everyone can afford to live in the city. These changes we've been working on since the beginning of the year, when the city submitted a legislative package, and many of you as housing advocates submitted a legislative package as well. We're excited to take the next big step forward. Boston, as you know, it's no secret, we read about it in the paper, we hear about it at community meetings, is experiencing one of the biggest building booms in the history of our city. The benefit of this growth is not felt by everybody, but it should be felt by everybody. It's important for us. Individuals and families should be able to build strong lives here and call the city of Boston their home. So we're looking for ways to leverage our growth so it'll reach all corners of our city, regardless of the neighborhood that you live in or the zip code that you live in. We've been growing affordable housing in a toolkit. So far, we've created 30,000 units of housing through our housing plan. 20% of those units are income restricted, or 1 in 5. We're renovating the oldest public housing developments in Boston. As Sheila mentioned, we passed the Community Preservation Act. We increased our state match. Thank you to the legislature for that, because that's going to make a big difference. When we passed CPA here in Boston, we were roughly getting 17 cents on the dollar. It's gone to 40 cents on the dollar now, and I want to thank our legislative leaders and legislators for doing that. We're taking 2 more steps to strengthen our most important tools, inclusionary development and linkage funds. This bill takes 2 crucial steps to making that happen. The first is flexible to adjust the linkage payments as we require from commercial developers. It allows us the opportunity, and before I go into the second point, it's somewhat a little disheartening that every time that we want to make a decision in the city of Boston, we need to go to the legislature to change it, whether it's linkage or whether it's liquor licenses. You saw an op-ed in the paper today. We're constantly going to the legislature for everything. And I'm pretty confident, at least I can speak under the administration I'm in and the council that's here today, for the last 6 years, we've been responsible by passing a budget on time, we don't do overruns, and we have a AAA bond rating for the first time in the history of the city for 6 consecutive years. So if we can manage our own money and manage our own city, we should be able to manage some of the things that we need in our city to move forward. That was my commercial. Now to go back to the bill. In addition to affordable housing, linkage funds may also be used for job training and education programs. And we created a program a couple years ago, Boston Hires, to train 22,000 Bostonians into higher paying jobs. Because as we think about housing, we think about jobs, and we think about people making money, we think about inequality. It's all linked together. So we're going to be working to use this money to be able to put more money into those different areas as well. These opportunities help Bostonians get into real careers and raise families. So we're not talking about raising the minimum wage so that we can barely get a family by. This is about creating opportunities for job training to get people into really strong jobs. And I know I can speak for everyone here today. We all do our part individually by trying to help people, and we're going to continue to do that. But this is a way for us to get more money into the funds to actually do more. Second, this bill makes inclusionary development a permanent part of the zoning code. So even as we upgrade zoning, affordable requirements remain the same. We can clap if you want. Since it started in the year 2000, IDP has helped create 2,700 units of income-restricted housing. That is an opportunity, that is money that before that wasn't available. And that's an opportunity for us to create more opportunities, to create more affordable housing, seeing that we don't have money coming from the federal government per se, and sometimes we don't get enough money from state or other opportunities. So we use this as an opportunity for us to raise our own money to be able to benefit our own developments going on in the city of Boston and put it back into housing. Combined with other resources, this fund will help us support an additional 2,000 units. We strengthened the policy in 2015, which helped us create even more homes. This petition also expands the role for the City Council in improving inclusionary zoning proposals. So when we talk about it, it truly is a partnership where we sit at the table with all of the activists and the developers and the people doing the building. But it's all of us. It puts a stake at the table for not just to sit with the mayor in the mayor's office and economic development and the BPDA, but actually go across the hall and have real conversations with the city council, something that's important. This is important because it's an issue that requires all level of government working with everyone. I think that as we think about our efforts on housing, and we do a lot of work, we all have different ideas on how to move things forward. But the one area that I think that we have unanimous support on is housing and affordable housing. Because wherever I go and wherever the council goes, wherever we go, in any neighborhood, whether we represent the neighborhood or we don't, we hear about housing. We hear about being pushed out of the city of Boston. We hear about not being able to live here in the city of Boston. And that's an issue that we have to continue to work on to change. Over the last 4 years, Boston has built more income-restricted housing than any other period, similar period on record. But we know there is much more that we can do and have to do, and we have to do it together. I just want to end with thanking everyone who made today possible. I want to thank, I'm not going to mention them all, but all the department staff who worked on this bill, the city council and your staff who worked on this piece of legislation, the legislative delegation, who is Boston delegation in particular, we've been in constant contact with. I want to thank them for their consideration and support. I want to thank Representative Honan, who couldn't be here with us today, for filing this legislation on Beacon Hill. And I want to thank the rest of the delegation. Lastly, and more importantly, I want to thank all of you, the housing advocates. Thank you for pushing us. Thank you for working with us. We are united in Boston around our goals of affordable housing, and we need to continue to do that. I urge everyone to contact your legislator about why it's so critical that we move this bill forward. And I also just wanted, there's another piece of legislation at the State House that deals with zoning that would make it more simpler for other cities and towns to create affordable housing. I was at a meeting the other night in the South End, and we were talking about the crisis of substance use disorder, addiction. And when we go to certain parts of the city of Boston where we see a lot of people in the streets, whether they're struggling with heroin or alcoholism or they're struggling with homelessness, we often find that if you ask the person, every other person is from a different city or town in Massachusetts. They're not from here. They come here because they're looking for benefits, they're looking for help. In some ways, the same is for people that are poor. They feel their only option is come to Boston. And I'm not saying that we welcome everyone, and I certainly welcome everyone, but we need to make sure that as we think about affordable housing, the other 350 cities and towns in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts needs to do their part as well. They need to help us. Just like I don't like seeing somebody who lives in Boston coming out to me and telling me they were forced to move to X city. I want them the opportunity to be able to stay in this city. So as you're advocating for legislation, just let people know how serious this is. And it can't just be the housing advocates. Because for years, the housing advocates have worked the halls, have gone in and got the amendments and pushed and pushed and pushed. We need to go beyond the housing advocates now. We need to get all of us, and we need to get the communities behind this legislation and other pieces of legislation when it comes to housing to let people know how serious this issue is and how serious we are in Boston about tackling this issue. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Really appreciate that. As the Mayor mentioned, Councilor Lydia Edwards chairs the Housing Community Development Committee for the City Council and worked tirelessly on this bill. And I really want to thank her tenacity and her ability to negotiate and end up with the final product we could all very strongly get behind. My friend, Lydia.
So I wanted to say, first, I have a lot of thank yous as well. Right back at you, Sheila. I want to thank you. You educated me greatly when I was at DND, and when I was at the Office of Housing Stability, I learned a great deal. And thank you, Mayor Walsh, for that opportunity to be head of the Office of Housing Stability at that time. To my other colleagues at DND, there's too many of you to mention, but all of you really did help to mentor and educate me and housing policy, and seeing it at a very large level, but also knowing it on the granular level. Finally, to my colleagues at Greater Boston Legal Services, part of the advocate group, but also part of the many people who are on a day-to-day representing tenants in the courthouse, is making sure that they have a voice and making sure that they are heard and are also part of that policy development. Not final, actually, to my colleagues on the City Council, I thank you so much. The headaches, the back and forth, the growth, it's all helpful. Those of you who have been here for many, many years, and those of us who came in as freshmen, I think I just love this group, and I love working with you, and I want to thank you personally for all of the back and forth, the pushing, and yeah, we got it done. We got it done together, so thank you. I'm genuinely thrilled to be here today as we send forward a strong piece of legislation to address our housing crisis. Housing our communities and preparing residents for economic prosperity are critical priorities for the City of Boston. As a district city councilor, I am keenly aware of the needs in our neighborhoods, especially East Boston and Charlestown, for folks to have a place to live and for our neighborhoods to grow in an equitable way. As residents are truly fighting to remain in Boston, it is an incredible city, and it's worth fighting to stay in. And this is going to be one of those tools in the toolbox that helps more people to stay here, especially our families. The economy is booming, but we need to do more. We need to make sure that as the economy is growing, so do our coffers, to assure that we can pay for good jobs and pay for affordable housing. And as chair of Housing and the Community Development Committee, I know that this pain isn't just about my district, it's citywide. That is why it's so critical that we act today to advance this housing economic justice policy. This legislation will ensure that Boston secures lasting affordability for those who live here and for those who want to come here. Linkage and inclusionary development especially are two of the most critical tools that we have locally to promote income-restricted housing. That means that we're committing not only to just creating that housing, but making sure it stays affordable for generations to come. I sit on the Neighborhood Housing Trust, and my colleague, Councilor Baker, sits on the Neighborhood Jobs Trust, and we keenly see how that linkage money is put out there and that we actually need more. We're able to see literally every month how these investments are going to impact everyday Bostonians. But these tools are greatly restricted by state law, and that's what this legislation will do. It doesn't say that we don't need the state. What it does say, as the mayor said, is that we, as Boston, we can handle this. Because we're dealing with the burdens of it, we need to make sure that we're able to handle and manipulate the benefits of it as well. We need to be at the helm for our own future. And while we appreciate the support of the state when it comes to matching grants, we cannot look to them to ask permission for how we're going to grow anymore. We're beyond that, and this legislation recognizes that. Through collaborative discussion with the BPDA, and also we've been able to identify areas where we can assure that this legislation is also inclusive. I'm very happy that we work together to make sure that City Council has a voice and that we're checking in, but we're not holding up process. Again, we're just assuring that we're part of the conversation. The City Council fought and assured that we also had inclusionary language and also some fair housing language as well, to assure, again, that the policy went from being an executive order to continued permanent policy for affordability. You know, our federal government might be backpedaling on affordable housing, but we in Boston, we move forward. And I'm so proud to be part of that city and that conversation to make sure that we advance regardless of what happens at the federal government. So today I'm just here to incredibly grateful, incredibly proud of the city that we're in and the leadership that we're going to take. And yes, I know for a fact there are a lot of cities looking at us wondering how they too can also make sure that they can lead like Boston does. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm very excited, and thank you.
The other city councilor that I would like to bring up is our very own Councilor Flaherty, Chair of Government Operations. Even with his busy schedule, he was able to pull people together in these working sessions that were long, sometimes tedious, but mostly respectful, and I really appreciate that. But out of that came very, very good ideas that really shaped this legislation. Councillor Flaherty.
Thank you, Sheila. Good afternoon, everyone. Obviously, great to be here. Great to be here with our mayor, my council colleagues, all of the advocates and community members that made today possible. Special note of thanks to Mayor Walsh and his team for sponsoring this significant piece of legislation. He mentioned a toolkit. I call it a toolbox. He's actually the laborer, but I'll call it a toolbox. And this legislation modernizes one of the biggest tools, if not the biggest tool, we have in the toolbox to address the growing affordable housing crisis in our city. I'd like to thank the utility infielders and the unsung heroes, Chief Dillon, who we've heard from today, Boston Planning and Development Agency Housing Policy Manager Tim Davis, BPDA Senior Policy Advisor Sanal Gandhi, BPDA Deputy Director of Regulatory Planning and Zoning Brian Glasscock, Office of Workforce Development Director Trin Nguyen, my colleague, of course, on the council who made enormous contributions, Councilor Lydia Edwards, all of my colleagues who supported this unanimously, Neil Doherty, who quite frankly should have got combat pay, working on behalf of the mayor, working with myself and Councilor Edwards in all those working sessions, and obviously the numerous advocates and stakeholders for their cooperation, collaboration, expertise, extensive contributions to this important piece of legislation. When my colleagues and I voted unanimously to approve this home rule back on August the 21st, it demonstrated that we're all committed to working with our mayor to provide greater access to affordable housing and job training during a time when demand is at an all-time high. Further, the wide variety of stakeholders who spoke on this proposal expressed in-depth knowledge of the need for affordable housing and strong forward-thinking legislation that balances our need for affordable housing and market rate development for our tax base during this booming real estate development market. And of course, the jobs folks, the job training folks were there every step of the way, and it was their spirit of cooperation that was also played a key factor in getting this thing done. With Mayor Walsh's approval of this legislation and with all the voices in this room continuing to advocate, that now it's time for us to push our colleagues at the State House to turn these ideas into action. Thanks again. Look forward to continue working on affordable housing crisis. Thank you.
As it's been mentioned many, many times, this money is also used for critical workforce development programs. For that reason, I would like to invite up Amy Nishman, Senior Vice President of Strategies for Jewish Vocational Services. Amy knows firsthand how to use this money and how important it is. Amy.
Thanks, Sheila. I'm here representing the Job Training Alliance, a group of 24 nonprofit job training providers who work tirelessly to make this happen. I'm also a proud resident of the City of Boston. I'm very grateful to all of the advocates and policymakers who have been a part of this process for so many years, including the wide support and leadership from so many current city councilors. We'd like to extend a particular thanks to Councilors Flaherty, Councilor Edwards, and Councilor Wu and their teams who truly prioritized this issue over the past few years and help us get to where we are today. And of course, thank you to the mayor, to Sheila Dillon, to Chief Barros, to Trin Nguyen, and the mayor's IGR team, and Sanal from BPDA, and so many others in the Walsh administration that have been leaders on this issue. Job training funds secured by linkage are procured in a way that measures and values performance. So only programs that move Boston residents into quality jobs receive these resources. Highly effective job training programs that move people into career ladder jobs that help to break the cycle of intergenerational poverty. The Job Training Alliance is proud to utilize linkage funds to bring those with barriers to employment into the Boston job market. In this tight labor market, where employers are desperate for talent, there are Boston residents who, with job training, can fill those current vacancies. This is great for the economy, for the business community, and for all Boston residents who want and deserve economic opportunity. I would also like to say, on behalf of the Job Training Alliance, that it has been a true pleasure to work with my colleagues in the housing advocacy groups. I have learned a lot about housing and all of your acronyms. As you all know better than most, housing and job training are inexplicably linked. in terms of the ability of Boston residents to remain in and thrive in the city of Boston, which of course was the intent of the original linkage law when it was put in place. We look forward to seeing this move quickly through Beacon Hill and celebrating an increase to linkage with all of you, allowing us to provide even more Boston residents with economic opportunity.
And finally, but certainly not least, I'd like to invite up Cortina Vaughn, community organizer at the Massachusetts Affordable Housing Alliance and a very respected member of the IDP Coalition. Cortina has had a very, very long and impactful career in financial service organizations, but more importantly, she's made increasing resources for affordable housing and equitable home ownership her life's work. Through her work, she knows firsthand how important these resources are. Cortina.
Hi. Thank you so much, Sheila. No one in Boston needs to be reminded of that our home prices and rents are just too high, and that we need to create more affordable homes for tenants and home buyers alike. It happens almost every day at MAHA, Mass Affordable Housing Alliance. We get a call, an email, a note from one of our proud home buyers, our class graduate, and they are so happy that they were able to buy their first home, and sometimes be the first person in their family to own their own home and achieve home ownership. We ask, well, where did you buy? Too often the answer is outside the city of Boston. But with the support and leadership of Mayor Walsh and the entire City Council, we are confident we can expand the pie with the passage of the Home Rule Petition on linkage and inclusionary development. We need a much bigger pie, and this is one of the important ways to get it. In July, over 1,000 people came out to the Reggie Lewis Center to add their voices to our campaign to expand the pie. Many grew up here in Boston and want to stay here in Boston. The legislation will help to make that a reality for the Boston residents. We want to thank all of our partners in this campaign, all of our friends in the IDP Coalition, Boston Tenant Coalition, CPA, and it's a massive partnership of other organizations, including MAHA as well. The Linkage Coalition, MACDC, and the Job Training Alliance. And of course, we want to thank our MAHA activists and members. All our strong supporters on the City Council, including Councilors Edward, Flaherty, Wu, Asabi George, Campbell, Janey, Flynn, and O'Malley, and of course, to thank Mayor Walsh and his Chief of Housing, Sheila Dillon, for leading this effort to increase the dollars desperately needed for homes we all can afford. In July, we gave Mayor Walsh and the councilors beautiful Expand the Pie pie plates. We are here and we hope that we're going to be giving out more of these pie plates to our state reps and senators very soon. So we got to make it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. And now is what we've all been waiting for. I'd like to invite Mayor Walsh up, the City Council, any electeds that are here, coalition members, cabinet chiefs, come on up, come in, watch the bill get signed. And now, after he signs, we've got to all pledge to go forward and get this passed. Thank you.